talk a bit about what Agile has become. So in two questions. Is it a recipe for successful product development, or is it really dying, as some may advocate? You probably have read about it. So many decades ago, something commonly known as waterfall has started being used for software development. Traditionally, it was used for in industries that build tangible products, and maybe more formal industries that were mostly plan-based. So this means that from the start, people would spend a lot of time analyzing all the requirements, thoroughly talking to all the stakeholders, and creating a really great number of documents and extensive documentation on product specification and what the product should be. Then it went on to the next stage, for example, from the design stage, where the designers would take that documentation and will start building prototypes or designing UI to create the final product. Then, after that, the developers would take all that pile of documentation and would have to read it and understand it and see the designs and then start building the product from scratch, from end to end, the full product, until finally, after a few months, it was built, and then the testing phase would start, and the QAs would pick that up and start testing, and then there were some bug fixing and another extensive stage until finally the final product was ready and able to be released. What happened is, most of the times, a high percentage of projects would fail to meet either the deadline it was supposed to meet in the beginning, or fail to meet what the customers expected from it, failed to solve the problem it was supposed to solve to begin with. So, with all this failure, after a few years, a few decades, came the Agile movement that was a bit supposed to help the companies overcome some of the issues and the problems that these subsequent failures had shown. So, okay, there were some other methodologies in the meantime, but let's just talk about the mainstream ones and the most best known ones. So instead of being plan-driven, it was more value-driven, and the focus was more not in defining what we want from the start, but giving us an orientation and a way to collaboratively and iteratively build something that we could know a little bit of what we want, but we wouldn't fix or we wouldn't define from the start what we want to achieve in the end. We know that we have to build something quickly and put it out, and starting to testing and iterate on it and improve it. So the most important thing here was not to define or to fix the specifications, but work around it and just work towards that deadline and to put out something to the market and make it work. Around all of this, there are some other characteristics that are common, like the quality of the product is also very important. And so these were two different approaches that were mostly common. So what happened with all of this? How did companies took this into their own daily work? They started taking their mid-level managers or senior managers or technicians or whoever, and sending them to attend extensive training courses and learn about these methodologies, and in order to become experts. So, okay, now we are going to learn about this, the concepts, how to structure our work, and we'll follow this like as a Bible. And since someone says that this will work and this will contribute for successful product development, it surely will do for my company. So we now are experts, we have these certifications, so surely this must work. And of course, sometimes it doesn't. Also, this happened to me. I also went through the PMI thing and the Scrum Master certification and the Product Owner certification. And I really don't consider that has been a complete waste of time, not at all. I think that one thing I failed to see when I was studying and going over, learning about those concepts was, okay, a good body of knowledge, but at the same time I missed some bridge between that theory and those concepts into the reality that we face every day. That was something that I missed when I was studying these methodologies. But at the same time, I saw that regardless of being a bit more formal or less formal, there were a lot of concepts and ideas or techniques that were common throughout the different methodologies, and I realized, okay, this is a different way of doing, but what we are focusing on can be the same. So I think there are some points that are really what matters, and regardless of how you do it, you need to pay attention to these things. So I started to realize that probably what fails is not the methodology itself or the set of concepts that you are learning, but how organizations try to implement it, and like as a recipe. Okay, if I take this recipe and apply it to my teams, surely I will get this result. And I think that doesn't happen because we are not baking cakes, like when you follow certain steps and you obtain the final result. I think that's not what happens here. And so one thing that we take when we get all this knowledge and go out to our companies, what do we see? We face an amount of constraints and challenges, like the markets are different. We work with different products, with different customers. The products we are building are different, and mostly we have different people. And I think that's what makes the biggest difference, are the people that we are working with. I don't know if you are familiar with Tuckman's model of team formation and these steps. Okay, in summary, what Tuckman says is that when a group of people is forming a team, they go through several different stages, starting from forming, people get together, they don't know each other, they just are a group of people, not a team, and they start to know each other, start to working together every day, and sometimes it starts to be a bit messy because they are different backgrounds, different ideas, and different ways of working. So they spend some time just adjusting to one another. And then things start slowly to be consistent and flowing like a river, slowly, until the point that after a lot of time, it's not a quick process, not at all. I think it takes really, really a long time, that they become a high-performing team, where they know each other so well, and they really sometimes they don't have to speak to know what each other is thinking or what they are doing. So it's after a long time, they become a high-performing team. So if something happens that disrupts this team, or someone goes out of the team, or someone joins, it becomes a completely different team. It's not some adjustment. I think it's really a totally different team, and probably the process will start from scratch. Probably what was working for this previous team will not work anymore because there's one person that makes all the difference. So I think that the challenge is what may sometimes fail is not. It's more how the companies take these methodologies and try to adjust to their own companies, regardless of the market they are working on, the kind of product they are doing, or especially the teams that they are working on. Because that will make all the difference. I don't know if you are familiar with the Shuhari concept. Anyone have ever heard of this? This is something taken from the Japanese martial arts, and it translates how someone starts learning a new skill or a new theory or whatever, and the steps they go through until they master that skill. So firstly, you start studying the concepts and you just follow them and obey the rules without questioning them. You just read and study and understand and start exercising it every day with repetition until it becomes part of you. And you can do that with your eyes closed and in your sleep. You really master all the concepts that are part of the body of knowledge that you are learning. Then you start detaching yourself from the rules, and you start innovating, you start putting something of your own into that skill set. And unconsciously, you are not following the rules anymore until you reach the last stage where you consciously start adding creative techniques into that body of knowledge. So what you are doing is no longer anything, not anything, but it's no longer what you have learned, and it will be different from what other people are doing at that stage with the same body of knowledge, because each one will do it differently and will master that skill differently and will always add something new from themselves. I think this idea adapts exactly how companies should be implementing and using these management methodologies or software development frameworks, because we should never just blindly take a Bible that says that we should work like this and obtain these results. We should do always contextual management and apply whatever tool we are using into our own teams, our company, our market. Because, for example, if you are building software, it's something intangible, it's something that is not predictable, something for which the result is not something that you can know from the start that what is going to be. It's something that is constantly changing and not something that you can do by repetition, like building a chair or building a table. If you do the same processes, you will obtain the same table, and that's what you want. But if you want to build software, you don't want to do that. So I think this is always has to be applied to what you are trying to do, and also the different teams that you are working on, because no team is the same, even within the same organization. So, for example, I work with two teams, and I can give you a small example of how this can work. Okay, generally we use Scrum. On one of the teams, at some point, we were doing daily stand-ups, and on the other team, we weren't, because that team was working together for a long time, and things were really, really going smoothly, and we found out that daily stand-ups were just a waste of time. There was no value in it. We didn't need to use it. But that team then suffered a bit of turmoil. People went out of the team, were working on other projects, people joined the team, and retrospectively, we came to the conclusion that communication was not flowing very well. Some people were a bit lost. They didn't know what other people were doing, or how the sprint or the progress was being, the work was progressing within the sprint. So we decided, okay, probably we need to go back and do stand-ups, even if it's not every day, but every other day. So not because it says on a book that we should do daily stand-ups, but we now find that it may be valuable and we really need to do it. And I think that's it. At the same time, for example, if you are working with a kind of new team, an experienced developers that really are starting to work and they don't know anything about how to work together in a team, probably they need some guidance. The team needs some guidance in terms of how to structure the work until they reach a higher level of performance. And probably in that stage, you could do something like developer anarchy, where you don't have any managers, any product owners. You just have the team just focusing on coding and building product and talking with the client by themselves without needing of any kind of formality, because they are all so high performing together that a different methodology may apply to them. So basically, we had 2 questions in the beginning. I don't know, I think it would be useful if you try to share a bit of your experiences working in your companies with these different methodologies, and what challenges did you have, or do you agree at all with what I am saying or not? Anyone wants to share anything or has any question? Okay, go ahead.
Going back to the methodology that you found on the Japanese martial art, could you adapt that too? Like, you have three words for stage, and like I hate the word obey.
Yeah.
So could you not start by doing something else?
Like what, for example?
Like, for example, back in my company, my manager, product owner, well, he never really applied Agile as is. Like, from the beginning, he decided that they were going to use Agile in our terms. So yeah, that worked very well. And what I understand by looking at that would mean that in the beginning we would have to obey certain rules to see how we adapt to those rules, and then move on from that. What I'm saying is that not do that, try to, from the beginning, try to understand what is going to work with us, and then move on from that.
Okay. Okay, I think that sometimes one thing that I mentioned that I didn't find the time wasted when I was studying and analyzing those methodologies. It's because that sometimes we don't want and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you are starting something and we don't have any experience, why not go back and find all that set of knowledge and concepts and ideas that were already taken and tested by others and proven to work? Why not test it and put it in practice, and then see? I think there's nothing wrong with coming to the conclusion that, okay, this was a disaster, this doesn't work, and we have to change how we are working. We need to be ready to accept that we are failed on what we are experimenting. But you say that in your case, you started just by not following any rules and do it like on your own, on what you think what worked for your company. And did it work? So perfectly, so perfect. That's it. You don't need to follow any rules. You don't need to just follow a book because, okay, people say, experts say that we should start by doing this, and then, okay, we can do that, and probably it will help in most cases, but it doesn't have to be that way. As long as you are able to see, okay, that worked, great. But if it didn't work, that's okay as well. It's not a tragedy. Okay, probably you'll lose some time, but that's how teams evolve and organizations evolve. That's part of what it is. I hope I helped. Any other question?
It isn't really much of a question, more something to add as of my experience on the project I'm working on. We started out with Agile and we tried having Scrum, and we do software development, by the way. So, but at some point we had like a bunch of iterations on how we organize teams so that it would fit our clients' needs. Currently, we almost, I think, every team, if I'm not mistaken, is working with Kanban and not Scrum. And it may seem odd because Kanban is usually associated with like the, sorry? Yeah, with production lines, because usually you don't really have that much of a vision for the next 2 weeks or for the next sprint. But it really works well with our client because we couldn't plan for 2 weeks. Even if you gave like, okay, I'm gonna say that this takes 13 points, like a sprint, and you could do it with 8 points, you wouldn't have enough. After 3 days, you had something else that was top priority, and you basically couldn't, you've reached the end of the sprint, you do the retrospective, and you would conclude that, okay, we didn't plan this well. And this happened every sprint. So I have a task, I have a backlog. That usually means that we need to have a really prioritized backlog. And when I finish my task, I just pick up the next one. If something's on fire and needs to be worked right away, that's fine. I finish my task, or I'll interrupt it if it has to be dealt with immediately, and I'll just pick it up from then. It doesn't mean, although, that we don't have a mid or long-term perspective, because we do. It's just how we define the work we do. It isn't done by sprints and just like every task at a time.
Yeah. Okay, so you just applied a different way of working to the team because of the needs of that project. Exactly. Yeah, and that's...
The Agile Manifesto basically states that it's not, like you said, a recipe. It's, if it doesn't work for you, because there are no set rules. It doesn't work like waterfall. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Try it another way.
Yeah.
If you like doing retrospectives and it actually works for your team, do it. If doing daily stand-ups just costs you time and your team communicates fine without them, why bother? I mean, you decide what you want to do. And even if you're in a project with 5 teams, it doesn't mean all of them have to follow the same path. You have different people in every team. So the team dictates what it's useful for them.
Yeah. But normally what you hear is, for example, when you are taking the courses or doing the certification, if you don't follow Scrum by the book, you're not doing Scrum. So what? We don't want to do Scrum just because. We want to do whatever works for us. I think
that's the funny thing. If you look back to the Agile Manifesto, it clearly states that there isn't a book written in stone that says how you should do stuff. I mean, okay, you can sell it as that, as I can sell whatever I want, like religion.
Yeah. Anyone else wants to add something? Anyone else? So we started with 2 questions. Is this a recipe for success? Is it really dying? So I think I didn't answer any of them. So I don't know if you were expecting answers. So if so, I just failed your expectations. But I think the most important thing here was for us to question those universal truths that normally we read about every day, and realize that sometimes things are not just as black and white as people try to sell us. And I hope you can take this with you. And if there's not anything else, thanks.